Opening. In many systems, work does not end when a task is completed. It continues in review. Output is examined, behavior is noted, performance is placed against standards that already exist, often without being questioned once established. This process is usually presented as neutral, necessary, a way to maintain consistency across people and time. Evaluation is framed as measurement rather than judgment, as alignment rather than control, as something technical rather than personal. At first, evaluation appears to arrive after the work is done. Tasks are completed, results are checked, feedback follows. But over time, evaluation moves closer. The possibility of being assessed begins to shape behavior before any assessment takes place. Decisions are filtered early, risk is managed in advance, work is adjusted not only to function, but to be legible. Evaluation does not need to intervene directly to be effective. It only needs to be present as a possibility. Standards remain in place even when no one refers to them. Metrics exist even when they are not actively applied. Comparison lingers even when it is silent. Work begins to anticipate review. Actions are chosen not only for outcome, but for how they will appear once observed. Justification becomes part of execution. Over time, this anticipation settles. It becomes routine. The boundary between working and being evaluated begins to soften. Evaluation is no longer something that happens later. It becomes something that surrounds the work as it happens. In this way, evaluation turns into an environment, not an event, not a response, a condition. People move within it, adjust to it, learn its contours. This episode observes that condition, not evaluation as correction, not evaluation as improvement, but evaluation as a space, a setting where behavior is shaped by the awareness that it can be seen, recorded, compared, and remembered. No accusation, no conclusion, only the pattern of how observation settles into discipline, quietly, without ever needing to announce itself. Observation. Evaluation often enters systems gradually. It does not begin as pressure, it begins as reference. Standards are introduced to create consistency. Benchmarks are defined to make outcomes comparable. Criteria are set so work can be discussed without ambiguity. At first, these tools feel distant. They exist on paper, in guidelines, or in occasional reviews. Daily work continues largely unchanged. Over time, however, reference becomes presence. People begin to adjust their work to align with what is measured, not because they are told to, but because measurement exists. What can be evaluated becomes more visible than what cannot. This visibility changes emphasis. Tasks that produce clear evidence are favored. Actions that leave traces are easier to justify. Effort that cannot be recorded quietly loses weight. The system does not discourage unmeasurable work. It simply does not see it as clearly. As a result, work begins to reorganize itself around legibility. Choices are made with future review in mind. Decisions are shaped by how they will appear once documented. Evaluation remains mostly silent during this phase. There is no need for intervention. Behavior adapts on its own. Comparison plays a central role here. Even when no explicit ranking exists, people are aware that standards apply across roles. Performance is understood as relative. Outcomes are interpreted against an implied average. This awareness introduces calibration. Individuals adjust effort to match what appears acceptable. Extremes are avoided, deviations are softened. Evaluation does not demand conformity, it produces it indirectly. The system benefits from this adjustment. Work becomes more predictable, variation narrows, outcomes align more closely with expectation. Nothing about this process feels dramatic. There are no confrontations, no visible discipline. Evaluation does not punish, it waits. The possibility of being assessed is enough to shape behavior long before any formal assessment takes place. In this way, observation becomes continuous without becoming explicit. People act as if they are being evaluated even when no one is watching. This is not fear, it is adaptation. The system does not need to remind anyone of standards. Their existence is sufficient. Work continues. Evaluation continues with it. When evaluation becomes internal. As evaluation remains present, its role begins to change. It is no longer something that arrives from outside. It becomes something that is carried. People learn the shape of standards over time. They sense what will be noticed. They recognize what draws attention and what passes quietly. This learning does not require instruction. It happens through repetition. Certain outcomes are praised. Certain behaviors are questioned. Certain deviations linger longer than others. From these signals, expectations form. Once expectations are understood, evaluation no longer needs to appear explicitly. Behavior begins to adjust in advance. Work is planned with review already in mind. Choices are made not only for effectiveness, but for defensibility. Effort is directed toward what can be explained, justified, and compared. This creates a shift in attention. Rather than asking what is necessary, work begins to ask what will be acceptable. Rather than exploring possibility, it moves toward alignment. Evaluation does not suppress action, it redirects it. Over time, this redirection becomes internal. People begin to monitor themselves more closely than they are monitored by the system. Questions that once belonged to reviewers are asked internally. Is this measurable? Is this aligned? Will this hold up if examined? This internal monitoring narrows variation. Risk is filtered earlier. Decisions move toward what feels safe rather than what feels uncertain. The system benefits from this internalization. Fewer interventions are needed, less correction is required. Work arrives already shaped to expectation. Evaluation becomes efficient by becoming invisible. At this stage, it no longer feels like observation. It feels like professionalism, like responsibility, like common sense. The boundary between external assessment and internal judgment fades. People do not feel controlled, they feel aligned. And because this alignment produces stable outcomes, it is rarely questioned. Evaluation has not disappeared, it is settled. It exists now as a background condition, present even when no assessment is scheduled, active even when no feedback is given. Work continues within it, adjusted quietly, guided by standards that no longer need to be enforced. Machiavellian lens. From a power perspective, evaluation is one of the most efficient forms of control because it rarely appears as control at all. Unlike direct command, evaluation does not require constant enforcement. It does not need to interrupt work or impose visible force. It reshapes behavior by defining what is acceptable, comparable, and legible. Power benefits from this distance. Those who set standards do not need to intervene frequently. They establish criteria once and allow behavior to adjust around them. The system learns how to behave without being told each time. Evaluation creates order without confrontation. From this lens, the purpose of evaluation is not improvement in the individual sense. It is stabilization at the system level. Standards narrow variance, metrics reduce unpredictability, comparison aligns behavior across large groups. What matters most to power is not whether work is exceptional, but whether it is manageable. Evaluation makes work manageable by translating behavior into categories. Performance becomes something that can be recorded, compared, and referenced later. This translation allows authority to operate at a distance. Those who evaluate do not need to know the work intimately. They only need to recognize whether it aligns with predefined markers. This separation protects authority. By relying on evaluation rather than direct supervision, power avoids entanglement with execution. It does not argue with work, it reviews it. The evaluated individual carries the burden of alignment. They must anticipate standards, interpret expectations, and adjust behavior accordingly. Power does not need to pursue compliance. It allows compliance to emerge. Once standards exist, deviation becomes visible. Visibility creates risk. Risk encourages self-correction. This process is quiet. No threat is required. No punishment needs to be explicit. evaluation produces discipline by making deviation legible. From this perspective, evaluation is not reactive, it is preventative. It shapes behavior before conflict can occur. Those who know they will be evaluated rarely need to be corrected, they arrive already adjusted. This is why evaluation scales so effectively. It allows systems to govern large populations with minimal direct intervention. Authority does not need to watch everyone closely, it only needs to define what will be seen. What is not measured fades from importance. What is measured becomes central. Over time, behavior reorganizes around this distinction. Power does not need to suppress action, it channels it. The evaluated environment rewards alignment, discourages deviation, and absorbs dissent quietly through comparison rather than confrontation. Those who resist do not appear as oppositional, they appear as outliers. Outliers are easier to isolate than opponents. From this lens, evaluation is not about fairness or accuracy, it is about legibility. What can be seen can be managed, what can be compared can be controlled, what can be ranked can be disciplined. And because evaluation is framed as neutral and necessary, its effects are rarely challenged. Power does not need to hide evaluation, it benefits from its visibility. The more transparent the standards appear, the more effectively behavior aligns with them. In this way, evaluation becomes a form of discipline that operates without force, without urgency, and without resistance. It does not need to act quickly, it only needs to remain. Modern framing, Greem. In modern environments, evaluation rarely appears as a single event. It is continuous, distributed, and often automated. Performance is tracked over time, activity leaves records, decisions generate data. Even when no one is actively reviewing, the possibility of review remains. This changes how work is experienced. Evaluation no longer waits for formal moments, it surrounds daily activity. Dashboards, logs, scores, reports, and summaries exist in the background, ready to be consulted if needed. Because of this, behavior adjusts early. People learn what generates positive signals and what creates friction. They recognize which actions are visible and which remain unnoticed. Work is shaped accordingly. This shaping does not feel imposed, it feels strategic. Modern systems encourage self-presentation as much as performance. How work appears becomes nearly as important as what it accomplishes. Clarity, documentation, and traceability gain value. Evaluation rewards what can be shown. As a result, effort shifts toward what can be recorded. Actions that produce clear metrics are favored. Subtle contributions that resist measurement slowly lose priority. Comparison intensifies this effect. Even when rankings are informal, awareness of relative standing persists. Individuals measure themselves against implied norms, averages, or benchmarks. Performance is understood as positional. This positional awareness produces calibration. People adjust pace, output, and risk to remain within acceptable ranges. Extremes draw attention. Consistency feels safer than exploration. Modern evaluation does not suppress ambition, it redirects it toward alignment. Feedback loops become shorter, signals arrive quickly, adjustment follows almost immediately. The system feels responsive even when authority remains distant. Because evaluation is ongoing, correction rarely feels dramatic. It feels incremental. Small changes accumulate over time. This gradualism makes evaluation more effective. There is no clear moment of discipline. Behavior simply shifts. Modern environments often describe this process as transparency or accountability. Evaluation is framed as shared information rather than oversight. But transparency works in one direction. Those being evaluated are highly visible. Those who evaluate remain abstract. Standards are present, but their origins are often opaque. The system appears neutral. It applies the same criteria broadly. Differences are explained through data rather than decision. This framing reduces resistance. Evaluation feels objective even when it reflects particular priorities. Measurement disguises preference. Scoring replaces judgment. From this perspective, modern evaluation does not need to compel, it invites participation. People align themselves with standards because alignment feels necessary to remain legible within the system. Evaluation becomes part of how work is organized, how success is understood, and how behavior is shaped. It does not ask for obedience, it produces it quietly. Psychological mechanism. When evaluation becomes continuous, its most significant effect is not external, it is internal. Over time, people stop experiencing evaluation as something that happens to them. They begin to experience it as something they carry. At first, this feels like awareness, a heightened sense of standards, an understanding of expectations. Work is adjusted to avoid obvious misalignment. Gradually, this awareness becomes habitual. People learn to anticipate how actions will be interpreted before they are taken. Choices are filtered early. Risk is assessed not only in terms of outcome, but in terms of how it will appear once observed. This anticipation reduces uncertainty. It also narrows possibility. Psychologically, the presence of evaluation reorganizes attention. Focus shifts from what is necessary to what is acceptable, from what might work to what will hold up. This shift does not feel like pressure. It feels like responsibility. Self-monitoring increases. People review their own behavior more closely than anyone else does. Internal questions replace external ones. Is this aligned? Is this defensible? Is this visible in the right way? The system benefits from this internalization. Oversight becomes lighter. Correction becomes rare. Work arrives already shaped to standard. As a result, evaluation becomes efficient by becoming invisible. People no longer feel watched. They feel accountable. This distinction matters. Accountability feels self-chosen. It feels mature. It feels professional. Over time, identity begins to incorporate evaluation. Being reliable, aligned, and measurable becomes part of how individuals understand themselves. Deviation no longer requires external discipline. It produces internal discomfort. This discomfort is not fear, it is misalignment. People correct themselves before correction is needed. They avoid actions that would require explanation. They prefer paths that are already legible. Creativity is not forbidden, it is filtered. Exploration is not blocked, it is delayed until it feels safe. Psychologically, evaluation becomes a compass. It does not dictate direction explicitly, it defines boundaries. Within those boundaries, work continues smoothly. Outside them, uncertainty grows. Because evaluation is rarely experienced as coercive, it is rarely resisted. People accept it as part of how systems function. They adapt to it without maiming the adaptation. Over time, the difference between being evaluated and evaluating oneself becomes difficult to locate. The system no longer needs to discipline. Discipline has been internalized. Behavior aligns not because of fear of consequence, but because deviation feels unnecessary, inefficient, or unjustified. Evaluation sustains itself this way, not through constant review, not through visible authority, but through quiet internalization, where observation becomes self-discipline and standards no longer need to be enforced. Closing observation. Evaluation rarely announces itself as control. It enters systems as structure. Standards are defined, criteria are clarified, comparison becomes possible. From there, behavior begins to adjust without instruction. At first, this adjustment is subtle. People notice what is referenced. They sense what is rewarded. They learn what draws attention and what passes quietly. Over time, evaluation no longer needs to appear directly. Its logic is understood. Its presence is assumed. Work begins to move within these boundaries naturally. Choices are filtered early, risk is assessed in advance, actions are shaped not only by necessity, but by how they will appear once reviewed. What began as measurement becomes environment. People do not experience this as constant surveillance. They experience it as awareness, as professionalism, as alignment with expectations. Correction becomes rare because correction has already been anticipated. Deviation is softened before it becomes visible. Extremes are avoided without being prohibited. Evaluation grows quieter as it grows more effective. The system does not need to intervene often. It does not need to justify itself. It simply remains. This pattern does not depend on intent or enforcement. It emerges wherever work can be observed, recorded, and compared. No one needs to be disciplined directly. Discipline settles into routine. Observation becomes expectation. Expectation becomes behavior. Work continues within this arrangement. Standards remain in place. Adjustment persists without being named. Nothing dramatic occurs. And because everything appears to function, the environment remains unchanged. Until the next observation.